Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's VSG game. This is happening between Kronic Wolfpack and XvG Equinox. I have posted the maps in chat. We're going to be playing Rialto, Kings Row, Oasis, Eichenwald and Blizzard World. This is part of the VS Gaming First Division tournament, the Overwatch League side of things. Tonight I'm joined by the lovely Donimay.
Hello everybody, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I think they are doing well, or hope so at least, if they are watching this cast.
I hope so too.
So essentially the teams have done map bans, we are just waiting for them to get ready to set up to start. Really interesting map choices that they have picked up here. We see Blizzard World in there. I mean, we see an Eichenwald from leg 3, we see Oasis from leg 2 of VSG. It's almost as if they've just picked all the maps that used to get picked for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is maps that you've sort of practiced in the past and that you're comfortable with, so maybe they're just trying to go with what they know.
Yeah, maybe, hey. I also think that it seems that they favor the control point, Blizzard World, Eichenwald, and Kings Row all being hybrid maps, Oasis being a pure control point map. So I think that's very cool to see, very interesting to see. Seems as if lots of teams just like the capture point kind of map, if you could put it that way.
It does definitely seem as if they do prefer that, although we do see a lot of hybrid maps happening at the moment in the current league, so it seems like people like to spice it up a little bit with capping a point and then pushing a payload rather than doing one or the other.
Yeah, precisely. We're gonna have to see what happens here. Looking at the team comps, pretty interesting stuff coming from the side of Wolfpack here. Wolfpack actually bringing 2 projectile DPS, so bringing the Pharah and the Junkrat. So it's almost as if they want to deal with the Pharah coming from Equinox with a counter Pharah if they happen to bring the Pharah, which it looks like they will be doing.
Yeah, no, we know that Obvious on the side of Equinox is very comfortable and the Ferry plays probably one of the best ones in the First Division. So one would expect them to sort of run with the Farah. It's a good pick for the start of this map. They do also have the 2 boop tanks to try and sort of use the environmental factor on this map. So it'll be interesting to see how these 2 teams sort of start this off.
Yeah, and I'm quite interested to see is how they focus down Lexere on that Widowmaker, because they don't really have the tanks to kind of deal with him, if you could put it that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely not much of a counter for the Widow at the moment.
And here we see Lexere taking out this the slow ground, almost just kind of hiding away, and he takes out Paragon. Paragon going down. Blur does get taken out, however, by Sojourner immediately afterwards. We are going to see if the teams can get a res here. Getting a res here would be smart thing, seeing as both their main tanks are gone. Sunshine does get Animatrium though on that Zarya, which means on the side of Equinox they might actually have to back off here, but it doesn't look like Dovius wants to. Dovius is actually pushing in here. Blur really putting on pressure as well, really standing by that payload, doesn't want to give away any room at all. However, Paragon is already back, coming back into this fight. That means that this fight is equal now, 6-6 yet again, which makes it very equal. And there we see the Riptide coming through from Sheldron, and it does pick up Space Band. The Space Band are going down. Lexere does pick up Sojourner, however, in return with Blur taking out Niru. That immediately means this fight is now 3v6 on the side of Equinox, really pushing in, really making Kronic Wolfpack's lives very, very difficult. Paragon going down there, Sheldron getting picked up, and they're either going to stagger Sunshine or just pick him up right at the end here. Oh, Sojourner does take out a cheeky pick there on Dobius. Animatrium might actually have to back up here, seeing as he doesn't have too much support on him right now. We're going to have to see what he does there. Blur pushing up with him, however, and Space Panda. Doesn't look like Equinox are going to back off from this point. They want to keep this ground. Sojourner, however, does look like he has ultimate. He might be looking to pop that back in here. Paragon, I see, is coming back. Blur is sitting on his ultimate as well, though. He's probably going to be looking to get that off. We see Blur getting in deep here, really wanting to look for those supports, and he does get the first support. He's trying to get that Mercy now. Dovius pops down his Pharah ultimate, and he gets 2 with that, securing this point off for the side of Equinox.
Yeah, we see Kronic Wolfpack resetting there. Equinox being very aggressive at this point in time. They really like sort of not backing down, not disengaging the fights. They keep pushing forward, and I mean a lot of their strength comes from playing around the obvious, and he does create a lot of space for them to work with.
Yeah, and what we can see is Dovius really applying the pressure. I mean, once Blur had gone down there, Dovius just kept applying it. He didn't even back up. He didn't even wink. He immediately went back in. And we see Blur here getting extremely aggressive. They're leaving one on cart, really trying to focus down into this Kronic Wolfpack team. There is an ultimate from Sojourner. He unfortunately doesn't get any there, almost going down actually to Dovius' Pharah here. Paragon looking for the picks on the Blur, however Blur does pick him up first. Sojourner gets Dovius in return, however, which might make this fight equal. Sojourner actually popping off, getting the Mercy as well, really doing very, very good work. And Amatrium does get Sunshine, however, which means that this fight is equal. And Amatrium really doing lots of work here for his team, really pushing up right into this backline. Blur does pop the ultimate, however, doesn't get much off of it, but he is creating lots of space for the team of side Equinox here. They're really pushing up, really making it very difficult for Paragon and his team to get back into this fight. He does have ultimate, this being Paragon. It does look like he wants to go in, and he gets Blur, and that Sunshine, oh, unfortunately Animatrium pops the ult and takes out Paragon as well as Sunshine. I thought Sunshine was going to actually pop his ult back at them. Unfortunately he doesn't, and that will be Equinox taking off that point as well.
Seems as if Kronic Wolfpack hasn't quite found their stride yet at the moment. They're still sort of a little bit frazzled, struggling against all the pressure that is being applied by Equinox at the moment.
Yeah, and I think we can definitely see that even in their team compositional swaps that they've made now. They're sitting with a McCree and a Soldier, really trying to deal with Pharah, where Pharah might not even be their main problem. And Amatrium and Blur sitting on that Reinhardt and Zarya are really creating a lot of space for them. Sunshine does, however, pop the Zarya ult. Dovius, however, in return pops down his Pharah ult, taking out 2, and Amatrium finishing off Sojourner. They're pushing in. They want more. They get Neru. They're pushing hard. They get Cat right at the back. Still 2 on point. It does look like Team Equinox might actually have secured this point for them fully. We're going to have to see what Kronic Wolfpack come out with here. They do have the Reinhardt ultimate. They do have the Soldier ultimate. Unfortunately, Blur gets his ultimate back off first. Paragon does, however, get the counter ultimate. Sheldron getting 2 off with that pick. Dovius does pick him off in the end. Paragon still on point, still keeping his team up, making sure that they get the picks they need. And Amatrium does go down. They're going into this Widowmaker, really trying to put on some pressure here, see if they can get the last few picks before they actually have to reset. And I honestly think that Dovius is playing a massive role here, but the way Blur and Animatrium are really pushing up is creating lots of space for this team. What do you think, Donnie?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, I mean, even though Dovius is sort of applying a lot of pressure, it does seem as if the tanks are putting in a lot of work. I think the swaps that they've made now, with Sheldon being on the Hanzo and Surgeon being on the May, is sort of, it's working out for them at the moment, because it does help to stop these tanks as well. So it does sort of, you know, with May freezing everybody in front of them, it really sort of halts that aggression that is being thrown at them. So we'll have to see whether they'll be able to sustain this hold that they've had at the moment.
No, and as you say, this May really just getting right up into the face here of Blur. Blur actually getting super low, almost going down. Sojourner, however, does get taken out. Oh, the Transcendence coming through, making sure that Animatrium's Zarya ult doesn't do too much. Blur is looking for an ultimate here. Paragon, however, right up in the back lines, really trying to get into the side of Equinox now. Sunshine does have to, however, back off with that Diva. Sitting right at the back there, Sheldon really trying to do some work from the side. But I think LexZA is really doing his part a bit more right now. Obvious getting 2 with the Riptire. LexZA picking up Cat. And that should be Equinox's point, unless Paragon can get here fast enough. Oh, and he charges Blur. Massive, massive charge. Immediate shatter down on point. He doesn't want to lose this point. He isn't going to let go of it now. Unfortunately, the numbers aren't on his side this time. Really well played there by Team Equinox.
Yeah, no, they came in hard, they came in fast, and unfortunately, it seems as if the swaps that Kronic Wolfpack made to try and sort of deal with this aggression came just a little bit too late in the game for them to sort of secure this payload. Maybe if they decided to swap a bit sooner into a counter, they would have been able to hold the point back a little bit longer, but it was a very nice, solid push from Equinox there.
Yeah, and I must say, on the side of Equinox, they definitely did extremely well with the way they... Equinox is very good at creating space with their 2 tanks, and that Pharaoh almost looming above you. And Sojourner was doing a very good job of keeping him almost in check. However, I felt LexZA played a bigger role than we might think. He was left almost completely uncontested for most of the fights, and he was just sitting in the backlines pumping in the damage. And as you said, had they made the swaps earlier on the side of Kronic Wolfpack, they might have been able to deal with that team composition earlier. What do you think of the picks they've got going now here, specifically on the side of Kronic Wolfpack with the Genji there?
Yeah, it's an interesting pick. I'm not sure if they're trying to use the Genji as a counter to the snipers that they might be running. I mean, it does give them a lot of mobility and a lot of damage output, especially when the blade comes up. It often sort of turns a fight in your favor if you can get a good blade going. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with it.
I also think that the blade might actually cause quite a bit of an impact here, specifically considering that Hanzo's ult as well as Genji's ult can be countered by Trance, but not both. So if you pop one and then you pop the other, Equinox are really going to struggle here. And we see Kronic Wolfpack opting to go around the left hand side with the Lucio. LexZA right there in between them. Blur really going deep, really getting in there, not really caring about what they're doing, but more about what he wants to do, and that's get right up in their faces. We see, Paragon actually counter-charging there, going down, unfortunately. Blur right here in the backline takes out the Mercy. LexZA picking up Sojourner. McWizard does finish off Paragon, and there we see Kronic Wolfpack are going to have to reset. They're going to have to get back here. We see Neru getting picked off right at the end there, unfortunately, and Sheldon as well. It almost looks like Kronic Wolfpack is really struggling to understand what their win condition is in this fight, specifically towards the Pharah. What do you think is the actual issue here for the side of Wolfpack?
Yeah, they definitely seem to be struggling with this Pharah. We'll have to see. Sheldon has now swapped off onto the soldier, maybe to try and deal with this Pharaoh a little bit more. I don't know if the tanks are quite providing enough sort of like protection for everybody else, because Dobvius is just so sneaky with where he goes around that it's very difficult for them to sort of try and get this going. And they left the payload alone for so long that, you know, despite the fact that they sort of didn't manage to win that engagement, the payload was stuck in the back where it actually could have helped protect them a bit more forward.
Yeah, I'm definitely agreeing with you there. I mean, they all rushed around that left hand side from their perspective, and they didn't touch payload. Almost exactly what they're doing now, where they don't actually contest the payload. And we see side of Equinox immediately getting back in their face. Oh, cross Hanzo ults. One going the one way, one going the other. However, it does look like Kronic Wolfpack is getting the better out of this, unless Stavius can bring us back with a big Pharah ultimate here. We're going to have to see. Paragon does get the pick on Animatrium right there at the end. It does look like Kronic Wolfpack know what they're doing now. They are in control. They really did well in that fight. Really got there quickly. Really put Equinox completely off guard. And as we say that, Paragon, however, unfortunately overextends. I think he thought his team was a lot closer than what they were there. Dovius does, however, get picked off by Sojourner. Blur knows that there is no shield tank, immediately goes in, pops the ultimate. He does get one for his effort. And the Zarya ult coming through as well. Oh, as well as the Pharah ultimate. Maybe a few too many ultimates there on the side of Equinox. They're only sitting with their support ultimates for this next fight. I think they're gonna want one of those ultimates back.
Yeah, no, they're definitely going to have to put a lot of work in to try and get one of the offensive ultimates up, especially given that Kronic will likely have at least the Grav, they have the Hanzo ult, they have the Soldier ult up.
Yeah, and as we see there, immediately Blur getting taken out with those Hanzo ults coming through. One of the defensive ults on the side of Equinox does get taken down. Paragon's still on this point, really contesting it. Sunshin takes out McWizard, but Dovius takes out Nero in that exchange. And Amatrium still doing lots of damage here, taking out Sojourner. Does get taken out by Shaldron right at the end there. It does look like this is going to be a 3v3 fight on cart. Paragon charges Blur, gets the charge off. Oh, and a massive shatter, taking out Blur. If he can get him down, this fight might be won. Dovius, however, ulting from above, does get Paragon for his efforts. But that does look like Equinox clearing up this point, finishing off the fight. And that is a victory for Equinox.
You know, quite hectic stuff. It was very well played there on the side of Equinox. They sort of... It looked there for a second as if Kronic had found their stride. They were pushing in, but I think that maybe, you know, the experience on the side of Equinox is sort of working in their favor here. They didn't really get rattled by the fact that that first push nearly wiped the entire team out. They sort of stayed cool, they stayed calm, they stayed collected, and they chose to sort of use their ults in sort of succession rather than using it all in one go. I mean, they did use a lot of ults, but they sort of used them one after the other, and I think that really helped to sort of keep a lot of pressure on Kronic Wolfpack. And it seems that if, you know, in them being a new team, maybe they're just struggling just a little bit still to sort of deal with that constant pressure that's being applied.
Yeah, and I think we see from the side of Equinox really there lots of experience coming through from their side, where Blur was extremely aggressive, however he didn't overextend as much as what Paragon was. I don't know if that's a miscommunication within the side of Team Wolfpack there, where it almost seems as if Paragon thinks his team is right behind him when they aren't, and I think that little bit of overextension from him causes that the whole team isn't really covered from this Pharah under his shield, and that Pharah, as you said, putting on so much pressure onto them really causes lots of strain on the side of Kronic Wolfpack here, because it's very tough to deal with a Pharah as is, but now you're not really getting too many you're not getting a shield barrier put in front of you. There's no one really helping you out as per se, because of these really aggressive Rhine battles that these two players are having. And I think right now it's starting to favor the side of Equinox with Blur, where his whole team is really engaging upon it, and they really can do that with the Pharah flying right above them.
Yeah, it does definitely allow them with quite a bit of room to work with. And I mean, Dovius seems to be applying a lot more pressure to the Kronic Wolfpack team, whereas the Kronic Pharah is trying to focus Dovius. So it does, the whole engagement is sort of set up to favor Equinox a little bit more, because their Pharah has the room to apply pressure to the entire team instead of just trying to counter the other Pharah.
Yeah, and that's a big thing we see with Pharah matchups, is there's almost like 2 to 3 things you can do. You can either take that Pharah 1v1 and immediately trust yourself kind of to win it, which is kind of, as you said, is what Kronic Wolfpack is looking to do. However, on the side of Equinox, as you say, they're playing a different type of Pharah. They're not bothered with the enemy Pharah. They're trying to take out the enemy team. And I think that's where Kronic Wolfpack have maybe struggled a little bit with it. because Equinox have really they're bringing it to the table in terms of how they are enabling their Pharaoh. They're putting in so much work with their tanks that Animatrium can, Dovius can just get right up into the faces of Kronic Wolfpack. And Kronic Wolfpack, as you say, they're trying to focus out this Pharaoh, but it's not working for them because the enemy Pharaoh she doesn't care about your Pharaoh, she cares about your team.
Yeah, no, and I mean, you see Dobby taking, he's not always just sort of face tanking Paragon and Sanchin in their roles. He tends to get around them, so he's quite often attacking these shield tanks from behind, which creates a problem when you have the barrier up. But if you do have these aggressive Rhine battles happening, then half the time you don't even have the barrier sort of in an ideal space, and you're already being attacked from behind. So it's quite clever play there on the side from Equinox.
As we see Equinox pushing right up onto this point, Blur immediately getting aggressive, however, is taken out by Shaldron. Paragon holding onto this point, he has lost his barrier, however, and it does look like this triple support meta here for Equinox might fall down, but the sustain is really coming out, it's showing its work right now, as we see them still take that point, still take control for the most part of that point without their main tank. Mercy does get taken out. Massive hook there by Dovius. Sojourner, Niru takes out Dovius in return, but Blur taking out Sojourner. And it does look like the side of Equinox might take this point, unless the Hanzo ults can stop them, but it looks like that has missed. Unfortunately, for Kronic Wolfpack here, losing that point rather quickly, yet again due to Equinox's pure ability to know when to disengage and engage, disengaging right there after they lost their main tank and engaging after that. What do you think about the side of Kronic Wolfpack in regards to that, Donnie?
Yeah, it's definitely a sort of a lot of pressure being applied, and they do have a lot of sustain with the trip support running at the moment. Kronic will definitely have to try and do something to get those supports under control.
Yeah, and as we see here, lots of ults getting popped from both sides here. Space Panda did pop his ultimate. Oh, sorry, Equinox. Not popping many ults here, and Kronic Wolfpack popping a lot. As we saw there, Sojourner does now swap onto the Junkrat. He was on the McCree, he popped his ultimate. Paragon having popped his ultimate. Unfortunately, there was no follow-up there. And it seems like Kronic Wolfpack are really, as you say, getting frazzled here. They need to back up, they need to regroup, maintain the composure, and get back onto this point. We see it a lot with VSG teams on King's Row, where they don't compose themselves after having lost first point and hold too far forward. And what that causes is for the enemy team to really push up very quickly. We see Sunshine and Shaldron really doing lots of work. They're taking out Blur and LexZA. Paragon charges Animatrium right back into the fight. And it does look like Sunshine should pick up the Baby Diva here. Paragon just going ham, going right into the backline, getting McWizard. Niru does pick up Animatrium. And it does look like Kronic Wolfpack have composed themselves a little bit more here.
Yeah, they do definitely seem a little bit more collected at the moment. They did pop a lot of sort of ults in the previous engagement, which I guess normally wouldn't necessarily be a problem. The problem with them is not that they're using the ults, it's when and where, because a lot of the ults are not really getting returned for value at the moment.
Yeah, and here we see a massive ultimate getting thrown by Sunshine there. Shaldron taking him out. Blur does take out Sunshine, however. And Paragon, unfortunately, losing his ultimate there in that fight. And it does look like Equinox is still going to be pushing this, point. It is a 4v4 right now, both main tanks having gone down. But Equinox does look in charge here, even though they don't have as many ults as the side of Kronic Wolfpack. Kronic Wolfpack really need to use their ultimates almost in a more combinational way. Unfortunately, Sojourner getting taken out there by Dovius. The ultimate coming through takes out 3 and a massive Diva Shatter there. Paragon unfortunately charging off point, missing the charge. That was huge. I mean, like, Animatrium, 3 kills there, really securing that point immediately for XvG Equinox. And usually on this last point, ladies and gentlemen, we see a very long stalled out hold from the defending team, generally speaking. However, it does look like the side of Equinox there, Animatrium really held that for them. He won that fight for them outright.
Yeah, absolutely. frequently we see that the Diva ultimates at sort of the higher level play, it frequently is used more as a space clearer than it is really to sort of, rather than to try and get kills off of it. So when you do manage to pop an ultimate like that and get half team in it, it really does make a very, very big difference for the push.
Yeah, like generally Diva's ultimates are used for clearing points like that, but Animatrium really, he just pops it right in there. It looked like Paragon was trying to block it. I'm not sure if there was a miscommunication. Everyone moved onto the wrong side of his shield. But unfortunately taking out 3 and the 3 core people that needed to be there in order to do it. We see Kronic Wolfpack here moving off of what they played earlier into a goats comp. What can you tell us about goats, Donnie?
Well, it's an interesting comp. I'm not quite sure whether, I mean, I've seen it run a few times in the last few matches that I've done. I'm not entirely sure whether everybody quite has a handle on it yet. You're running the trip tank, you're running the trip support, so the idea is to use the Lucioski's boost to get in as quickly as possible. You've got massive sustain with the 3 supports, you've got all these big body tanks with these big health pools that are quite difficult to kill if you don't actually have a lot of DPS like sort of spamming right into that. So if you manage to not either take down 1 or 2 of the tanks or 1 or 2 of the supports, it's going to be really hard to sort of stop this steam train that's coming at you.
I completely agree, and we see here immediately rushing this left hand side. Blur does get aggressive, however that might cost him his life. Oh, he does get pushed back. It does look like they are getting super aggressive here. Paragon getting right in there. Sunshine does take out Blur. McWizard going down. Space Pounder about to go down, getting hooked by Sunshine. And that is Paragon charging right in there. Animatrium going down. Shardron getting legs hit there. Only Dovius on point left, and he's dealt with quickly. And that just shows you precisely what you were talking about. Just getting right up in their faces, getting right up onto point, and just out-sustaining them, just winning the fight outright. Paragon getting extremely deep here. Not sure if that's what he wanted, or but it does look like he's backing up now.
Yeah, no, definitely. This is the power of the Goats comp. It's very strong, but sort of the condition for this to work is that everybody needs to stick together. You can't have 1 or 2 tanks going road on their own. They will be taken out by the double DPS on the other side. Yeah. So Paragon playing sort of very aggressively, sort of running off on his own at the moment is not quite ideal for the composition they're running. We also see Sheldron very far up front with Zarya at the moment. It makes the comp a little bit more difficult to pull off.
Yeah, I think it does, but I think what really worked for them in that instance was the fact that Paragon supports immediately reacted on what his position was and where he was going. Dovius immediately popping a massive ultimate, unfortunately not getting too much out of that. It does look like Sheldron popping his ultimate back at them, taking out Animatrium. However, Blur does get rid of Paragon in the backlines. Sojourner taking out Lexede on point. And it does look like Dovius, being the only DPS alive now, is taking them out. Blur's still there, really applying the pressure onto these backline supports. Sunshine does look like he's about to go down, really in a bad position. Blur pushing up, however Paragon is back. The main tank is back for Kronic Wolfpack, and he isn't having any of this. Oh, unfortunately, those Zenyatta Discord orbs with Dovius there, you're not going to survive very long.
We see Equinox doing a very aggressive push back there. The Zenyatta is definitely sort of counting in their favor, despite the fact that Kronic Wolfpack has this Brigitte that does a lot of work for them. That extra bit of damage that comes from the Discord makes that if the Brigitte drops her shield to shoot, she's going to go down, and then it's going to be quite a bit less effective. And you really need all the supports up for this comp to go the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah, and as we see there, Paragon, massive ultimate, really pushing in, does get Space Pandu's out of position. Blur popping his ultimate, and Animatrium popping his ultimate, and that's going to be 4-5 there for the side of Equinox, really turning that fight back immediately into their favor with a massive Graviton Surge by Animatrium. He's had an outstanding game here on this off-tank role. I mean, really saving Equinox a lot of work. or that they had to do on that last point with the Diva ultimate. Here, yet again, it looked like Equinox is in a bad spot. Space Panda having gone down so early, but they just turn the fight back on its head and take Kronic Wolfpack back. I mean, honestly, I think the tanks on side Equinox are really doing well here, and we see immediately Paragon yet again getting extremely aggressive. However, Blur does take out Neru and now Sojourner. That is 3 from the side of Equinox. Dovius really putting in some work here, trying to get into the backlines, trying to focus out Cat out of that fight. Paragon does get back aggressive. Sunshine moving backwards, not sure whether to engage or disengage. Cat goes down, Sunshine going down, and it doesn't look like Kronic Wolfpack have an answer to this composition.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, sort of the strength of this whole GOATS comp is the fact that people need to, you need to stick together, you need to work as a unit, and it seems very clear that Equinox is well aware of this fact, and they're almost using the fact that everybody needs to stick close together against them at this point in time. So it's definitely time for swaps to happen, and we see that Kronic Wolfpack is indeed swapping off this GOATS comp. It's not working for them anymore, and they need to sort of try and run a different comp to try and counter all this aggression that's coming from the side of Equinox.
Yeah, and we see Dovius just sitting right at the back there, taking on Neru and Cad. Immediately the sustain for side Kronic Wolfpack gone. Paragon got extremely aggressive. Sojourner and Sunshine did, however, get some picks. Paragon taking on Animatrium now. And now it's Sunshine and Paragon back on this point. Dovius, however, does take care of Paragon. Sunshine having none of it with Shaldron. They're both back on point. And what we saw there was very cheeky by the side of Kronic Wolfpack, opting to go up over the bridge and around, and got the pick early on XvG. Dovius had lots of game sense there, actually turning back and trying to take out the supports, which he did. However, not working in their favor. Blur getting extremely aggressive yet again here. Massive shatter takes out Cat. Unfortunately, the rest of his team isn't there, so he cannot take out Paragon. XvG does, however, DMX Sunshine, which is quite a big thing at this point in the time. Seeing as there are only 40 seconds left, Sunshine needs to get that mech back extremely quickly if he's going to be tanky enough for this next fight.
Yeah, I think the sort of the early pick they got in Animatrium as well counts a lot in their favor. Animatrium, as you said before, is doing a lot of work for them. So if you can get one of these tanks out of the way, it leaves you with a little bit of space to work.
And there we see a massive Transcendence by Neru, saving the whole team of Kronic Wolfpack. Shaldron getting 2 on that Deadeye, really doing lots of work. Massive stuff there. Blur gets counter shattered by Paragon immediately. The Diva ult on point, clearing out points. Space Panda is trying to go in for the res. Can they get him down? Unfortunately not. They're pushing onto Blur now, really causing lots of havoc for him. He does charge out back onto point, really wanting to contest it, really not wanting them to go any further. Paragon says no, he's pushing in. Dovius is sitting at the back though with a Pharah ultimate. Unfortunately, Shaldron shuts him down immediately, and it looks like Kronic Wolfpack have this point. They're pushing forward. They are saying no. Sunshine immediately going right into XvG, pushing him back. Shaldron cleaning up the kill. That was really good stuff there by Kronic Wolfpack.
It seems as if not only have Kronic now adapted into this new comp that is working out really well for them, but they also seem to be doing a little bit better with target prioritization. They seem to be, they're picking off Animatrium first, they're getting to the supports, they're working on XvG, which is one of their big DPSs at the moment. So they really seem to be sort of finding their stride in this last push.
Yeah, and here we see, as you say, that unfortunately Equinox really popping off, specifically XvG. They're getting 4, I think it was. Massive players there by Equinox. Unfortunately, I think Paragon letting them down there again, charging extremely aggressively into the side of Equinox, but with no support. It's almost as if there's a miscommunication as to what's happening there. XvG picking up Neru, that's going to be a big pick. However, he does get picked up in return by Shaldron, having none of it. And it does look like the side of Equinox here wants to get aggressive. They want Animatrium's ultimate to come back up. If they can get that, they can keep them off point. And Animatrium has gotten it now, and he's going to pop it right there. And that's the side of Kronic Wolfpack practically gone. Neru's going to go for point, really going to try touch that. But it's pretty much over with the Zenyatta and the Moira left on point. It's not going to be done. And that point and map going to the side of Equinox. And sure, some big plays there happening, specifically from Dovius and Animatrium there.
Yeah, and it's what we expect from Equinox, to be honest. We know that they work well together. They do a lot of work. It took Kronic Wolfpack sort of a minute to and they pushed really hard with the goats. It worked well on that first point. Unfortunately, it didn't work for the rest of the push. It took them once again maybe a little bit too long to swap off of that composition onto the new one, which worked really, really well for them in the next push. Unfortunately, Equinox countered with an equally as good adaptation, swapping Lexade onto the Hanzo, having Dobvius go off the Pharaoh onto the Junkrat, allowed for them once again to sort of apply pressure where it's needed to be applied. So even though both teams are adapting well and trying to counter quickly, it seems as if Equinox is doing it in just a slightly more efficient way than Wolfpack is doing it at the moment. And I think that's really sort of the experience that Equinox has from being in this first division for an entire leg already. I think maybe that's counting a lot in their favor.
As you said, definitely I think the fact that they've been here for a whole division longer is showing. And I think on the side of Equinox's, they had almost the perfect counter to goats already. The fact that Dobvius is such a strong Pharaoh directly countering goats, we saw Dobvius putting in a lot of work, really keeping them back, and then later on swapping onto the Junkrat, opting for that. In a closed environment like King's Row, goats it's going to be very, very hard to shut down that Junkrat that just keeps spamming into you and keeping your shield down. And that's one of the biggest things for the goats composition, as you said, is the fact that they have to stick together. And I think the Reinhardt on side Kronic Wolfpack just needs to either communicate with his team as to when he's going to be going in, or they need to somehow work out a system there the exact same way side Equinox has it, because they are doing it extremely well at this point.
Okay, so on our aces we get to see something for a change that's not a hybrid map, so we'll have to see what the teams bring to this. I mean, strategically these maps are played quite a bit differently. They tend to either be over really quickly or sort of be stalled for quite some time. There's no real in between for these types of maps.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, a capture point like this is all about regrouping, saving your ultimates, doing economy pushes, and really trying to group up and stick together as best you can, dying quickly together or winning the fight quickly together. And we see the side of Kronic Wolfpack actually pushing left hand side straight onto point, choosing not to engage with Equinox on main. They have brought their own Pharaoh this time in the form of Sheldron. There are going to be two pharmacies essentially running here. Blur does immediately go in right into Paragon's face. Paragon does, however, take out Blur, and he gets Animatrium in return. Dovius does, however, take out Sheldron. McWizard taking out Paragon. Dovius doing lots of work here, taking out Cat. And we see Dovius yet again doing all the work here for Equinox. Really, it's almost as if you don't kill Dovius, you need to if you don't kill Dovius, Blur's gonna screw you over, but if you don't kill Blur, Dovius is right there. It's kind of like this back and forth, like who do we focus?
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely looks to be a problem at the moment, because despite the fact that their main tank went down relatively early in this engagement, Dovius still managed to pick everybody off. I mean, both the main tank and the Brigitte went down together, so that whole entire front line was absolutely destroyed, but yet they still took the point and won the fight, so very nicely played there on the side of Equinox.
Here we see Dovius immediately taking out Chardon, really trying to get aggressive. Blur, massive shadow, and that clears out the point for Equinox there. Really good stuff, knowing exactly when to engage, when to get aggressive. Dovius opening up that fight, killing Sheldron on the Pharaoh, and Amatrium knowing they can go in there. Blur knowing they can go in there, immediately push in there, not giving them any room to work with. And I think a big speaking point here is the fact that Kronic Wolfpack are running the double support versus Equinox's triple support.
Yeah, not only does Equinox have more sustains, but I mean both the first two pushes that Kronic Wolfpack did was in the small confined space, where if you have a Pharaoh like Obvious on your case the whole time, you really don't want to be trapped in a small room with a Pharaoh.
Yeah, definitely. And here we see Obvious popping off, getting the Sunshine, getting Cat, immediately pushing back into Shaldron, trying to pick him up. Maybe overextending? No, unfortunately, he's not going to get punished for that overextend. And here we see Equinox really just pushing in, really causing lots of trouble for the side of Kronic Wolfpack. They're getting super aggressive, just popping all their ultimates right now, hoping that they can just kill Kronic Wolfpack before they get to point. Shaldron does go taken out from XvG, and that does actually secure them the point. Really good stuff there by Equinox, knowing that they could get aggressive and push right in there.
It's very fortunate that sort of overconfident push that they had. They worked out in their favor. It could have gone very wrong for them, but it's nice to see. I mean, off the previous maps, we've seen that they do get quite aggressive. They're very sort of up in your face. They push very. I think that maybe a higher level team might punish them a bit quicker for that, but the fact that Kronic Wolfpack is still sort of a little bit new to the scene and sort of struggling a little bit to deal with this Pharaoh allows for them to be able to do that without too much of an effect on them at this point in time.
Completely agreed. I mean, we see from the side of Equinox really applying the pressure, really showing Wolfpack that we're here to play, we're here to get up right in your faces. And I think the triple support, as you said, allows them to do that, allows them to get right up in their faces and do what they need to do. Kronic Wolfpack here actually opting for quad tank. This is a smart move if they can stick together, I feel. Unfortunately, Nero does get taken out, however. Paragon countercharges Blur, does get taken out by XvG. Only Cat, Sunshine, Sojourner, and Shaldron back on point. Sojourner gets taken out immediately by McWizard. Shaldron struggling to survive here, trying to get Dovius as a pick. Unfortunately, does not. And Amatrium takes out Sunshine, and Cat gets trickled right there at the end. And I was actually about to say that this comp is extremely strong if you can stick together and keep your supports alive. Unfortunately, Neru getting picked off there right in the beginning, just opening up that fight for XvG Equinox.
Yeah, it seems like they definitely sort of know how to counter a comp like this. The fact that Equinox is also running the Brigitte creates a little bit of problems for this quad tank sort of comp that they're running at the moment. The Diva gets taken down quickly. The Ryan is going to have a bit of trouble with this Brig right up in his face. And we know where that Blur is very aggressive. So both the aggressive Ryan plus the Brigitte makes that half of your tanks in a quad tank setup is really going to have a difficult time to sort of stay sustained, even if your support doesn't go down. So with the extra support down, it really makes it very hard.
Yeah, and as we see here, I think on the side of Kronic Wolfpack, they really need something to do a bit more damage for them. Right now, they don't have anything that breaks a shield except Shaldron on that Road Dog. Massive ultimate there by Dovius. That was very, very good stuff by him. Yet again, XvG really putting in work with that Zarya, but popping that ultimate in order for Dovius to get that pick, to get that 4 kills that they needed to hold that point. Paragon going for point, really trying to hold this point, really trying to get there, make sure that they actually have time to contest, but it doesn't look like any other members of his team are going to make it, and that is going to be the series, ladies and gentlemen. Equinox taking it 3-0. And as we see there, Donny, I'd say the biggest thing yet again is the fact that Kronic Wolfpack had nothing to answer this Pharaoh with, nor did they have anything to answer Blur with. They didn't shut him down when he got super aggressive like that, versus every single time Paragon went in to take that fight, Equinox would just punish him. They'd immediately focus him down and take him out of the fight, leaving the Kronic Wolfpack with their main tank down, versus Equinox, their main tank having gone in but still alive because he's not being focused out, And I think that's a major playing point that we saw in this duel between these two teams.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm just still a little shell shocked from everything that just happened, to be honest. But yeah, no, definitely. We see that Equinox sort of moves more as a team. So Blur goes in, he's super aggressive, but he always at least has either one support or the brig, or he has one or two people sort of with him almost at all times when he starts an engagement. Where Kronic Wolfpack, whenever Paragon sort of charges in, half the time he's on his own with somebody on their way to him, but not quite there yet. So he frequently ends up alone, and then he gets punished for that, especially with the fact that Blur is always there with at least one person with him, usually a support, but frequently Animatrium is right there next to him, so it's a difficult one to play.
I completely agree, and I think the fact that lots of teams playing Equinox feel that they need to focus out this Pharah completely out of the way, but what they're kind of forgetting is that if you win the rest of the fight, the Pharah's kind of the last thing you need to worry about. And we saw that the times that Kronic Wolfpack took the main fight and won the fight on the ground, the fight in the air became much easier for them because they weren't so pressured by Blur up in their faces. And I think on the side of Kronic Wolfpack, what they need to look at doing when they're dealing with a Pharah and an aggressive Reinhardt like this is they need to look at winning that fight on the ground, looking to really stop Blur and anyone around him with him, because many a time, as you said, he does have one or two players with him. However, he's still not in the best position to be in, and as you mentioned earlier as well in the cast, that had this maybe been a bigger team, they might have been punishing him a bit more for that. And I think going away from this match, Equinox really needs to look at maybe being a bit more disciplined in how they're doing it. Even though they did it so extremely well, I think that they might face problems later on in the leg, where an opposing team comes through that can shut down Dovius' Pharah and are trying to punish Blow every single time he goes out of position. And I think on Kronic Wolfpack what they did there was, as you said, Paragon isn't always with his team, or his team isn't always with him, and that really created the win here for the side of Equinox. Both of these teams having a very similar play style, very aggressive, very up in your face. I mean, you saw those run-out charges, folks. I mean, other side of the map type stuff.
Yeah, it's charge on counter charge on huge shatter with another huge shatter. So the Ryans definitely sort of trying to keep one another on their toes.
Yeah, I mean, the whole game, it was just counter shatter to charge into bubble Ryan. It was all over the place the whole time. But we do see Equinox taking the series 3-0, and that's going to be all from our side, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone enjoyed the cast. If you have any issues, problems, any things you experience with the cast, the stream being slow, laggy, etc., please do message me, let me know. Thank you yet again, lovely Donimay, that cast with me. It's always a pleasure casting with you.
Yeah, and it was a fantastic mashup. It was very action-packed. Thank you once again for having me. It's always great to work with you. Thank you to the teams that provided us with all the action, and thank you for the reviewers that are always there, watching us, judging us, looking at the action. We appreciate you all.
Thank you, everyone. Stay well.
Bye, everybody.